I will turn it over to Garrett. I actually covered that first half in like 30 minutes after the intro. I'm pretty impressed with that.
Nice.
But I'll turn it over to Garrett for the second half. Like I said at the beginning, we've got a lot to talk about. If you're watching, if you comment in the chat, we'll try to, address it as we go. But I will turn it over to Garrett to talk about history and about history of the debate and where we go from here.
Oh yeah, so this will be fun. And I don't have controls for it, Chris, so I'll have to ask you to advance the slides. But thanks everyone for following along, and feel free to leave some comments. If there's parts of this presentation that you have questions for, leave them in there, and we'll see if we can address them as we go. If there's just a part of this that you're really interested in and would like to see more, let us know that, and we can have future live streams that narrow in and focus on parts of these things, because all of this is a giant topic, like we said before. So Chris gave you kind of a background of a lot of terminology on what is capitalism, what is socialism at a very high level. But kind of buried within all that is the debates that went on through history of exactly what those terms mean and how we kind of arrived at those definitions, and how some of those definitions are still debated today as capitalism evolves. That today's capitalism is not what it was like 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So let's really briefly go through a history of some of the major debates in socialism, and some of the kind of major points in U.S. history with socialism, so we can better have context on how this discussion is going to inform our present work. So the concept of socialism, of kind of cooperation and jointly owning things, as workers and communities, goes, it's always been a part of human history. So let's first make sure that we understand that socialism wasn't just invented like 100 years ago or something like that, right? The concept of it goes all through human history. But in terms of a sociology, a science, a thing that we've studied very carefully to try to understand better as a social phenomena, as an economic phenomena, the philosophy behind it, all this stuff, that dates back only a few hundred years. The roots of it, especially in the West, go to the European Enlightenment era, where there were a lot of advances in philosophy. We started to understand science, physics and chemistry and things, and you started to see the first industrial revolutions as societies transitioned away from the more agrarian agricultural societies into kind of what we understand today of cities and industry. And during that time period, you saw a lot of philosophers. You saw who discussed these issues and discussed what it was like to live during that transition, right? So there's way too many philosophers to mention or to talk about for real discussion, but to emphasize a few that were important in especially socialist thinking. You had the philosophers like Immanuel Kant, Hegel, and Feuerbach. And they wrote about things such as epistemology, which is the idea of where does knowledge come from? How do we know what is real knowledge? Like, how do we know what is truth? That sort of, it's actually a pretty deep concept, right? It certainly can be. And one of the ways that they tackled how to develop knowledge, how to kind of understand things, is what's known as dialectical thinking, which plays a really key role in a lot of socialist movements. And the idea is that as we're considering a lot of things, there's a lot of apparent contradictions in nature, in human societies. We do contradictory behaviors because we're motivated by different things simultaneously, and we're trying to resolve those conflicts and trying to move forward. So there was a lot of philosophy of dialectics in how do you resolve those conflicts to try to move forward and kind of develop better knowledge and understanding of things. There's also a lot of work in ethics. What does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to live a good life? And that, of course, plays a big role in socialism, because a lot of it is, right, abolishing poverty. We're trying to figure out what does it mean to live a good ethical life where we're not harming or oppressing others. We're actually helping people. And, of course, that led into philosophy where we looked more at like sociology. How do societies interact? How do nations interact, and how can we kind of create societies that can move toward peace with each other, right? And to have this international cooperation that's required to make a global peace, to move beyond the wars and imperialism and all that had existed in history up to that point, with royalty and moving into colonialism and stuff like that, right? How do we move beyond that to have a peaceful democratic world?